I think this is fire. This is great.
Oh man, hello everyone. Thank you so much
What's
for
up?
joining us live. Oh wow, so we have 130. Oh, well, numbers climbing real fast. So we're close to 140 people live right now. Fun fact: we have close to 1,000 people registered for this event. So Mitch is very popular, even though we just showed his face on a tiny little graphic. Totally fine. But yeah, house rules. If you have or have not been here, I see Chris is already typing in the chat. Say hello in the chat. Throw your LinkedIn, network with each other, all that fun stuff in there. Yeah, let us know where you're from. I love to see where people are joining us from. Mitch, sometimes we'll have people from like across the globe, and they'll
Yeah,
and
we
they'll be
got
like
North
way under time.
Carolina, Wisconsin, NYC. Yeah, we
Boston.
got
Wait, did I see a San Diego there? We were just talking about San Diego. Oh, we got Bay Area. Mitch is up in the Bay
Vancouver.
Area. I am in San
Hey.
Diego. Yes, we have everybody. Well, hello. So I am Emily. I am the community manager at Designlab. Today I have my very amazing and talented friend, Mitch. He and I go back a very long time. Mitch, did you know that as of next year, we probably will have known each other for 10 years?
You're kidding.
I got hired at Apple at 2013, or maybe even before
What?
that, 2011. Maybe it's already been 10 years. But anyway, Mitch and I have known each other for a very long time. I always remember Mitch as the person hiding downstairs in our break room with a laptop doing something related to design or video. And here he is today. He is an actual designer like me, like a lot of you, hopefully, or a lot of you aim and aspire to be. So yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. All right. So everyone's already saying hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from, share your LinkedIn, all that fun stuff. We'll cover this again later, but this is recorded. So if you want to watch this later, share it with your friends, all that fun stuff, it is recorded. It'll be posted on YouTube probably tomorrow or Monday. And if you have questions along the way, please toss them in the questions tab, not in the chat, mainly because everyone is going to be chatting, saying hello, and I don't want to lose your question. So yeah, we will do that. So we're going to kick it off with some topics for Mitch to get us going. And then
Let's
as
do
we
it.
get questions, we're going to let you guys drive the conversation. Cool. All right. Mitch, I'm going to hand it over to you. Let our lovely folks know what you do, and then we'll dive into like your journey into design.
Yeah, absolutely. What's up, everybody from all over? My name is Mitchell, and you saw my super long last name. It's I pronounce Ajimatanrareje. I'm Nigerian American, which is great. And I work at Meta, formerly Facebook. Super confused because I still work on Facebook app, but like that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I'm a product designer and fun things like that. So, and I've kind of like been in design for a little while, and so it was really dope to be able to be here to share a little bit of my experience and to just like hang out with y'all.
I think we may be, oh, yep, audio's in and out. It's okay. It's all right. So if anyone didn't hear that, Mitch is a product designer at Meta, previously Facebook, but he still works on Facebook apps, so it's okay. Don't panic. But Meta does kind of include a lot of, it's an umbrella for a lot of Facebook companies, but specifically you're on the Facebook product. So what does a typical day look like as a product designer at Facebook?
Well, that is a really great question. And okay, I hear a little bit of the echo now. I'm sorry if the audio is kind of crazy. Hold on, let's try the AirPods. Maybe that might fix it, or it might break on. I'm going to find out. I know when you get into like AirPod lands, it gets a little.
I think that might be okay. I hear you. Sorry, everyone. Lovely end of day.
Yeah,
technical difficulty.
It's definitely that.
All right, that's much better.
That's much better.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, there we go. The typical day. Okay, so I'll walk you through my day to day. Currently, I have like a few different work streams that I'm on. And I'm obviously meetings up the wazoo, joining in on the meetings, trying to figure out exactly what our milestones are, what we're trying to figure out, and then also trying to, make sure that we are not only hitting those milestones, but we're kind of like approaching it in the right way or the best way possible. And so we're having like Eng in the room, we're having XFN in the room, we're having design in the room, trying to make sure that we're doing everything as best as we can. And so after those meetings, I actually had a little bit of design time. I actually got to, work on some interaction flows for the next iteration of some of the features that we're implementing. And I didn't disclose this before, but I work on the dating product here at Meta. So trying to help all the single folks, you know what I mean? Or, you know, like if you have non-traditional, you know, coupling styles, that too, you know, we're trying to solve for helping people build meaningful relationships. So that's what I work on, and that's typically my day. So it's meetings, squeezing in a little design time, more meetings, and then just like circling back with people in conversation, trying to make sure that we're tackling the right problems and in the right way.
Mitch, I don't know if you saw, but Stephanie met her boyfriend on Meta Dating.
Woo! What's up, Stephanie? That's what I'm talking about. Metrics and impact. Let's go.
Thank you for confirming, Stephanie.
I'm about to share that with the team. I'm like, guess what I heard?
It's great validation. I love it.
Absolutely.
So I guess, okay, let's talk about your design time. Is this something that is kind of built into your schedule? Like how does that work? Mainly because, right, we talk about all these meetings that we have, regardless of what role you are in a company, and the actual heads down time to actually do work sometimes is very little. So how protective of design time is like Facebook? Do they kind of give you free agency to decide?
They do. Like a lot of working at Meta is determining like being able to manage your own work stream, right? So like my manager will actually come to me. We had a conversation yesterday where she was like, what are you working on? Like, let's just run through the list. Not that she doesn't already have like awareness. It was more so just like, hey, let's all lay it out on the table and then begin to prioritize, because things are getting added left and right. Priorities are shifting. And it's up to me really to then say, okay, if this is our priority, I need this amount of time to allocate to not only designing, but to take it to crit, to take it to any other XFN forums like privacy and safety, and making sure that like all of my designs and interactions are kind of like congruent with our design principles. So I'm pretty much the one in charge, but then I do have management. If I do say that I need X amount of time and I need to take something off of my plate, they're like, okay, cool. Like we're going to put it over here, or we're going to deprive that work because this is what was important. This is what is most important.
And I guess based off of that, how does that work with like developer sprints, right? Because obviously they can't develop without things from design, but if priorities shift on the design side, how's that communicated to development?
When you say development, could you you mean like to like the engineers?
Yeah, like the engineers, like anyone, I guess any team that would actually be building whatever you're designing.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about Meta is that like engineering is part of the conversation from the jump. So when those changes are made, engineering is part of that conversation. I know that there are times, like say for example, during crit, like most of the times when we have crit, it's designers, content designers, and PMs if they need to be involved. And if anything changes within the crit, I immediately go into like our XFN like communication and talk to Eng and say like, hey, we have an update, like we're actually going to like make changes.
Yep.
And then I work with them to figure out exactly what's the best way to like implement it, because then they'll tell me, they're like, that change is actually going to take like 6 weeks of additional work for like that one button. I'm like, yo, hey, I thought it was simple. Okay, what can we do? And so I play this really great middle person most of the time trying to figure out what that balance is.
I love that though. Sometimes like at some companies, I do find that designers are so far removed from talking to engineers. Like you have to filter everything through like the PM, right? You have to like pass on the information and play telephone and hope that your message gets across. So I love to hear that, you know, you're very like hands-on with, you know, talking with the developers and stuff. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
So I guess if we want to dive into like your career path, the one question that came to mind when you were talking about working with developers is, what was like the most shocking thing once you entered product design? Like now you're a full-fledged product designer, but like what was like the most shocking thing, or like things that you had to learn that you're like, oh, I didn't think that this was a thing?
I didn't realize how much of product design was strategy, to be quite honest with you, because I do have a non-traditional path into product design. And once I got here, I thought I would just be able to play around with screens, we're focused on the design, like the user journey, like them getting from step A to step Z. And once I got here, I was then given the responsibility to define a product area. Yeah, like we're trying to grow metrics, say for example, we're trying to get like meaningful engagement. And we need to do this on this specific surface, which is like, say, for example, profile, where people get to see who you are. And in what ways can we increase meaningful engagement from this surface specifically? And I was all like, cool. I immediately jumped into the UI UX of it. And I'm like, oh, we could do this, we could do that. And in the meetings, they didn't even ask for my designs. It was like the designs came out like the back half of the meeting. They were like, all right, let's talk about the strategy. Let's talk about the hypothesis. Let's talk about the problem statement. Let's talk about all of these other strategic components that are supposed to inform the design. So I'm sitting there in a meeting, super excited to share my designs. And I'm being asked questions more about the strategy, like the approach, how are we getting there? I'm like, I don't know, man, this is just dope. This interaction is just great. Like, this will obviously make people match more. Like, this is it. And they're like, why?
Why, everyone? So the one thing you brought up earlier, which was talking about going to crits, right? So at Designlab, we have something called group crits, which we want all students to participate in, because you have to learn how to present your work as a designer, not just to other designers, but to other flavors of people who work at your company, right? Whether it be PMs, developers, CEOs, whatever it is. And then the other part is learning how to actually have the back and forth conversation. So
yeah,
can you dive more into like, is that what crits are at Facebook? And I guess like, how do you guys like go about like asking for feedback and stuff? Like do you have like a cadence that you guys do that?
Yeah, I would say that within my team, it's actually like the dating team is super great. I have like some really great designers who we do have like a set time for crit. We have crit every Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12. And we have like a sign up. So like you bring your work, you create a post on our like internal forums, like letting people know exactly what you want to bring to crit and why, and what kind of feedback that you're looking to solicit. And so like we have like a formal process to it, but then like we can also do things like async. So there are sometimes when I'll design something that like I know that we need faster turnaround on, and I'll just drop it in the chat. I'll be like, hey, this is the Figma link. Like, can you go in and make a comment? And once you get in there and they begin commenting, then like I'm in there working. I'm like, oh, yo, that's a good. Nah, we can't do that. And then I'm commenting back. So some of it is formal and then some of it is informal, which is great. And I just really love the fact that like we have like that asking for feedback isn't like this big thing. Like I could really just jump in and ask me like, hey, I want to ship this, like we're on a timeline. I need to turn this around quicker.
It's like habit now, right? It's like second nature to like not move forward with anything unless you have feedback. Like it's almost like don't feel confident in what you're working on until you get other eyes on it.
Exactly.
How big is your team? Like the team that you're on specifically, like how big is your team? And then I guess like in comparison to maybe other design teams that are at Meta, like is yours considered small? Is it pretty average?
I would say that our team is on the small, this is on a medium space.
Medium? Okay.
Yeah, it's like the medium space where like our core design team currently right now, we have 5 designers. And we have like a slew of PMs, content designers, design managers across like different verticals, like different spaces within dating. So I would say that we're like a medium team.
Okay. Well, just so everyone knows, medium is now a word. It's a thing. That's dictated by us. Okay. I want to touch on your non-traditional path to design. And now I will preface to everyone here, partially the reason why, and if you had attended, I think, our chat with Tiffany Taylor last year, Tiffany's, I guess her journey was very similar. There just weren't resources like boot camps available like 10 years ago. Like it just wasn't a thing. Like If it was, our stories would be very different, but it's not. So hence why Mitch is here, because Mitch really just wanted to share with everyone, like, it's okay if your journey is not the same as everyone else's. And your journey can absolutely include a boot camp. I'm sure if boot camps were a thing, we probably would have signed up for one. So, but it wasn't. So we gotta figure out our own path.
Absolutely.
So what did you do? I guess, like, when you knew, like, okay, I want to go into design. I know you have your bachelor's in, was it fine arts or graphic design? Graphic design. Mm-hmm. Graphic design. What was like the moment where you're like, ooh, I don't know if I want to like keep pushing towards graphic, or was it more like you kept pushing, but then kind of came to the realization that like you need to pivot a little bit?
I came to the realization that I needed to pivot, but then that pivot was kind of forced.
Yeah.
Right. So like, like I graduated with my graphic design degree, and then the economy tanked. And no one was hiring a designer unless you had like a decade's worth of experience.
Yep.
So, and that's how I ended up at Apple, how we connected, right? But if you remember at the time, that was the peak of the individual app design boom, right? You had apps like
an app for everything, even a flashlight. You just needed your screen to just be a white screen, and it was just really bright. That was the flashlight app. That was it.
That was the app. And that app got downloaded millions of times.
I know. And the light.
Millions.
Remember the light one? Come on.
Yeah. Like I remember, I think it was a singular designer who made Temple Run. And he was like, I'm overwhelmed. I didn't expect the success from Temple Run to be what it was. He only charged $1 for it and made millions of dollars multiple times over. And so while we're working at Apple, we're in the center of it. I was all like, I can design an app. I want to make millions real quick. And so like, that's when the journey of self-tutelage began, and began to like kind of like develop that.
So we kind of talked about this earlier, kind of how like all of these things like started at Apple. So for anyone who, maybe if we have folks here who may have worked at Apple too, I always am so surprised when people are like, I worked at Apple too. Apple is very user experience focused. Like when we went through training, I remember specifically being told, like, it really doesn't matter how much money they spend. You want to be able to foster those connections and basically build trust with your customer, which is essentially building trust with your user, right? So so at least in our experience, Apple really did set us on the path of putting the user first, like thinking about their needs before our own, and also putting it before the company's needs. Now, does that always happen? No, but that's a topic for another day.
Oh yeah, we get in trouble.
I know. All right. So in terms of your journey, like what did you do to like, you wanted to design an app? Like, where did you start? What did you start doing to like, figure that out?
At the time, so I was using the tools that I had available to me at the time, which was Photoshop.
Yep.
So I was literally designing screens in Photoshop. I look back and I cringe.
Right? Oh my God.
In Photoshop? Yo.
That's what you were doing in the break room the whole time.
Exactly. I look back, I'm like, wow, that happened. But yeah, I used the tools that I had at the time to begin designing screens. And then as time progressed, that a sketch came in like around, I want to say like around the 2014, 2015 space.
Yep.
Hopped on Sketch and began designing. A sketch was definitely more catered and built towards it. But it was really taking problems I saw and I wanted to create solutions for.
Yeah.
So I remember I wanted to create like a outfit customizer that used like the Beats sentence framework where you're like, oh, I'm going out on a Friday night with the boys. And then you get like all of these different outfits that you could put together. I'm like, now I think back, I'm like, how would that work? Anyways, yes.
Now that you actually know the whole design thinking process and all the things you have to sit there and like think through, you're like, I don't know what I was thinking.
Exactly. I was like, I don't know. I was just like, oh, it would just magically come together. It was weird. But even in that space, you get to learn quite a bit about how to solve a problem. So like I was here, I was like, okay, cool. I want to do this outfit thingy. And the moment I started designing like the UI and how people would interact with it, I'm like, oh, that won't really work. That won't really work. That's kind of cool. And so like in that process, I was able to kind of like develop, but it was all using the skills that I had currently and a lot of just like seeing what other people were doing in the space and like learning from them as well as I went along.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
so Angel asked a question, which is actually really relevant and what I was going to ask. So thank you, Angel. You had your own path, you're working on your own projects, right? And,
Mhm.
you know, for everyone in the boot camp, not just Designlab, but other boot camps, you're usually left with, you have like these projects that you end the program with, right? So that way you have a
Mhm.
portfolio and stuff like that. Because you had kind of either created or sourced your own projects, you know, in terms of creating a portfolio, like what was that experience like for you? And through your interview processes and your job hunt, like how did you kind of realize like whether or not, or how did you find out like if your portfolio was like up to snuff, especially in the being in the Bay Area, right? Like there's so much competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat. Like this is what I worked on at the time to that landed me my job here at Meta, and I'll let you know how that came about. So, um, since I didn't have like a traditional body of work,
Yep.
I had simply just been working on things. But because I've been up leveling my skill, thankfully, and this is what I mean by like an atypical journey. When I first got here to Meta, I was in design operations. I was here to project manage designers. But because I was here and I developed relationships here, the link that I shared that project with designers here at Meta who I was close with, and then I asked them for feedback. I was all like, "Hey, I designed this thing. Can you um, let me know what you think? Like, I'm trying to become a better product designer and are trying to understand this." And then they were like, "Whoa, wait, hold on.
Why are you not a designer?
Why are you not a
Yeah.
designer?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I'm just doing this for fun." And then they helped give me feedback on not only that design, but then how to take that work and leveraging that into a product designer role here at Meta. So I was able to partner with a manager who saw the design skill, saw the potential there, and then he actually allowed me to step out of design operations into a product design role, like kind of like a, because I was contracted at the time. I was able to step into a contract to PD role, which doesn't always happen here at Meta, having to pivot like that. And then through there, I was able to actually get my hands on shipped work. And from there, I was able to use that for my interview to land the full-time position.
Nice. Well, congratulations
Yeah,
on that. Um,
thank you.
when Mitch, when we were messaging and asking him to do this webinar, he said he was a PD, and it literally took me 2 days to figure out what PD meant. Because I got that, and I was like, now I understand what you mean.
Sorry if I drop any acronyms. My bad.
It is okay. At least for me, it probably was the end of the day. My brain's all mush, all that fun stuff.
Mhm.
Let's talk about, actually, I'm sure folks here are probably a little bit curious about what a design interview process is or what it looks like at Meta.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can share that doesn't like spill the beans too much?
Oh, no, I think it's fairly well known. Like, and I think it's the same across any organization, excuse me. Um, where like the interview process, we had kind of like a preliminary initial interview, understanding my skills, and we did like an app critique, a problem solving, and then we had like a portfolio review.
Yeah.
The portfolio review was where I was able to share the work that I shared in the link that I shared with other designers. I was like, this was self-initiated, self-guided work. This was the problem I was trying to solve. Like I had people here who helped me frame the hell out of that thing. Like even it being a self-initiated body of work, they were like, oh, you touched on this design principle, this design thinking thingy. And I was like, I
I
did?
did the thing and I didn't know I even did the thing. Yeah.
I was like, dude, that's dope. And so they were like, can you clearly articulate what the problem was? Can you clearly articulate where your hypothesis was? Can you tell us why your designs, if they were to ship, would have proven your hypothesis or not proven your hypothesis? And like being able to kind of like walk through the design thinking
Yeah.
of how you end up at the final product.
Yeah.
And so like I was able to share that in my past work interview. And because of that pivot I made, I was able to also share work that I had done here at Facebook then, but Meta now, where I work with like parenting groups, I work with pop culture. And I was like, okay, so these are the things that I shipped. These are the things that are now live. And this is the process. This is how I worked with. They really like to know how you work with engineers. They really like to know how like your cross collaboration skills work.
Yep.
And to what end.
Yep.
And I was able to articulate all of that through the past work interview. And then the app critique and the problem solving are kind of like understanding your design eye and then also your design thinking in real time.
So the one thing that that often comes up as like a topic of discussion, at least with Designlab students, is a lot of their projects that they leave Designlab or other boot camps with, they are self-initiated projects. Essentially, they're not real projects, right? And I think you have like such a great example of like really just like kind of proving that it really shouldn't matter if you actually understand, right, the thinking behind it. Because I'm listening to you talk about the interview process, and I don't even think once, like other than portfolio review, like it wasn't even really mentioned that like, oh, we like drilled down to the pixel and like stared at your designs and stuff, right? So would you, I guess I'm assuming you would probably agree that the design interview is largely more about how you think as a designer, like how do you problem solve, and then to the other point is like working with other people, right?
Very much so. It's like how does everything, like how you think and how you work with others, like equal results. Like that is pretty much like the entire equation. And that's why when you mentioned me, like asked me, what was the thing that surprised me the most was the fact that like we don't really care about the pixels. They just want to care about like the thinking that led to the pixels. And that's something that I'm still trying to work on, because my first go-to, because of being self-taught, my first process or orientation is to design first, ask questions later. Now it's ask questions first, design later.
Yes.
I'm like,
because, right, the consequence of designing first now is that you could design the whole thing, get feedback that doesn't at all relate and respond to what you're working on, and you got to go back and redo it all.
Redo it all.
Redo it all.
Like you got to go back to drawing board.
In the same time frame. Due date is still the same.
Oh yeah, no, the milestone is there, and it's not moving. It's like figure this out. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, so I know you kind of touched on this earlier about, like your general workday, but like Stephanie's asked me, how's your workload managed? Are you agile? Do you work in sprints? Like how do you guys like define or figure out timelines?
Yeah. So that's a heavy question. That's a heavy question. I started thinking about all the different little components. So I will say that, like, say for example, we work in halves. So we have like half goals that we try to aim towards.
Yep.
And we have top line metrics that we are trying to make a dent in or make improvements on, make gains. And we kind of work back from there. Not only that, but we also have organizational priorities where, Facebook or Meta at large, we're like, we want to win in this area. How do we do that?
Yep.
And then that trickles down to our separate product areas. And we then figure out exactly how to make that happen. So now last year, I want to say around October, we began planning for this half that we're currently in. So we began scoping work, not only that like our backlog that we didn't get to, during that half. And we're like, okay, now this is now a new priority. We need to get this done in the
Yeah.
next half. And then we kind of like have conversations around, do these new priorities, if we do make new priorities, do they line up with what our organization and leadership's the saying we need to focus on?
Yep.
And once we have that conversation, we get like research involved. We're across the board making sure that the things that we're trying to tackle will in fact have impact. And that has nothing like, that's our kind of like our hopeful. We're like, yes, this is what we want to do. But then there are certain things that change. For example, I had a huge project that I was working on, and we had high confidence in it, but we didn't have high confidence in its ability to be able to move top line metrics. And so when we initially scoped the work, we thought it would take 4 to 6 weeks of work. I can speak. And it would actually take significantly longer. And we'd also need another team to come in. And apparently with engineers, they work in different languages. So like one team is working in React and someone is working in native, and it's just, anyways, they're incompatible. They
Yes.
don't work.
Nope.
Porting over.
Yeah.
There's a whole other thing. And so when we dropped that from our roadmap, now we're in this weird flex mode where it's like, okay, we had engineering bandwidth scope for this amount of work. Now they don't have that anymore. How are we figuring out, like to make sure we're using the best of our resources,
Yep.
the things that we want to work on?
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's really no one easy answer for that.
No. I don't even know if I answered the question. Did I?
No, you did, but
Okay.
So in true product and or UX design fashion, the answer is always it depends. That's it. Yeah. Like we're like, if we just made a t-shirt that says it depends, like that would represent all product and UX designers. Yeah. This one's an interesting question, but I don't think we're like, this one's more of an opinion question, so I'm going to rephrase it. So the original question is, how do you decide between choosing a product design role and a UX design role? I'm going to change the question to, what do you think the differences are if there are any? How do you like if you were just searching for a job, right? And you knew like, hey, my skill fits both roles, but like, how do you decide? How do you know which one's like you? And they both are kind of written the same.
Very much so. That is a very great question, because like I don't know if I've encountered anyone, at least here at Meta, who is specifically a UX designer. Yeah. I believe that it gets folded into the product design discipline.
Yep.
And so like you're just a product designer and that's just part of your job. So there is no decision in coming to Meta. But I do know that there might be other organizations, and I guess it would really depend on their definitions of the different roles, right? Yeah. Of what is UX versus product design.
Yep. And I guess let that be known to everyone that the titles are highly subjective. Highly. You will find UX design roles that are asking for a UI developer. So you actually have to just read the job description. That's really what it is. Like. At the end of the day, like the title matters in terms of like, you want to tell people who you are, you want to tell them what you're doing, but at the end of the day, like focus on the actual responsibilities that they're asking for, and kind of qualifications. Because I think that probably gives you a better idea. But in large, for those who don't know, in large, and this is a very, very massive generalization, product design typically does a better job or has more of a focus on incorporating business goals. Exactly what Mitch said. You have to ladder everything up. Everything has to have a purpose versus in some companies, a UX design position is strictly just work on everything before high fidelity design. You're going to sit there, you're going to conceptualize, research, all that fun stuff. And sometimes you're going to have to do UI work, but maybe your work doesn't directly ladder up to a goal because all you're doing is adding features. You're just being given direction. So in my experience, product design is a little bit more hands-on because you're very intertwined. Not to say that UX design isn't, but largely, again, overgeneralization of the major differences between the two roles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect way to put it.
It's just hard, everyone. It's just, we basically do everything under the sun. Everyone wants us to do everything under the sun. That's really
just lump it all together.
All right, I was waiting for this question, so thank you, Enrico, for asking this. So, hey, Mitch, you mentioned metrics a bunch. What methods do you use to measure the success of your design, to get your metrics? And also, I mean, Facebook, you guys have so much infrastructure. It's like you already kind of know, like, well, we need this metrics. Great, tag this, set this up, NBD. But how do you determine, one, what metrics to track, and then two, how do you guys do it?
Yeah. That's a phenomenal question, and we do it in a number of different ways. Like, if it's a net new feature, where all we want to see is like, are people using this? You know what I mean? And so we have like that's all we want to know. Like, are people using it? If people aren't using it, cool. And then what we use is like, how did other features that we introduced perform? And we kind of like average out a baseline. We're like, okay, so like most of our features when we launched them performed, between, 1% to 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So like the goal then is 2%. If 2% of people use the thingy, great. All right.
That's a win.
Now we can talk about evolving and iterating on that feature. And I do want to take this moment to say it's not all about metrics. I think it's just on the top of my brain because that was some of the meetings I had today. But like one of my design mentors, he was like, metrics aren't the answer. A great user experience is the answer. And if you have a great user experience, the metrics will then follow. It will be like a consequence of a great user experience. But yeah, so like that's one of the ways that we kind of like determine if it's a net new feature. Then if we hit that 2% with the new thingy, then we iterate, and then now we're trying to see if it can impact our top line metrics. Like, so now can this thingy actually like have people either hang out more, like have more conversations, send more likes, shares, whatever the case might be.
Yep.
And then we iterate to see if we can do that as well. And so it's kind of like a ladder.
Yeah.
Like if you hit one metric, then you kind of get to the next one, and that metric then is determined once again by how other things performed at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this comparative thing. But then like that's not where it stops.
Nope.
Right? Like, so if the thing I designed only did 1%, if I had strong enough conviction behind it, and I'm saying we just have to wait, and this is how we're going to make improvements, I can make that call. I can say like, no, I believe the metrics based on research. It's always great to have research on your back. Always great. Have research. You be like, nah, people say they want this. So like, let's continue to invest in this space. And then like being able to make that call is super important, and knowing when to make that call is super important. Sometimes you just got to let things fall.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know what to tell you.
So I'm assuming with Meta being an incredibly large organization with 1 billion and one designers, I'm also assuming that comes with 1 billion and one like ideas for features, products, all of this stuff. In your time there, design ops to now being a product designer, what would you say like an average percentage is where projects actually get shipped?
Mm-hmm. That is a great question. I would say maybe I think it's different from team to team.
Yeah.
I want to say like from our team, like about a quarter of the things that we work on get shipped.
Okay.
And that's just based on the things that I was working on last year. Like we only like really shipped to 100% of the population one thing, but we worked on like 5 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to say on average it's 20-25%.
So the reason why I asked is because we have a lot of folks here who are very new to just the design world and stuff, and oftentimes when you are not in the world of design, when you are just a consumer of a product, you're a user, in your head, similar to, hey, Dev, you can change this button, right? It's going to take 2 seconds. You're like, no, it's going to take six weeks. Similarly, as a customer and a user, when you do make product suggestions and requests, like just trust that companies do see it, but also just know that the reason why something isn't being built is not meant to be a personal attack on anybody. It really is just companies have metrics and goals that they need to report on back to the board. Whoever is above that C-level person, those are the people they're trying to please. So at any point when you think it shouldn't be that hard, right? You can just design this in. There's a lot of factors that needs to go through. I mean, and I love that Mitch is here because I think other than Tiffany, I think you both are probably the only like folks I brought on here who work at really large companies, because Tiffany works at Netflix. So yeah, I know. So I had two fancy friends on here. I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So we're gonna jump into questions because we are about 20 minutes in. Oh my gosh, we have so many. Oh, this is a good one. This one's from Rob. So I guess like, do you have mentors, whether at your job or elsewhere? And like, I guess like to kind of piggyback off of that, I know like, you know, you kind of talked about you really wouldn't be here without the support of the people in your network. How do you have a mentor? And if you do, how'd you find one? And if you don't, like advice for folks who may want to find mentors or just like network with other designers?
Yeah. I love this question. Because like I honestly wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the support of the people who were there to help me. So when I first got here at Meta, and one thing that I really like about Meta is the fact that very much like on platform, here you can find a niche. You can find a group of people based on an interest that you have. Like I'm a big sci-fi buff. So, and there is literally a sci-fi at Meta group where they're just people. So there's engineers, there's PMs, there's designers, there's everyone centered and focused around this particular interest. And so like, even though work isn't necessarily like what we're talking about, if I ever wanted to, I could reach out to someone because I've already had a conversation with them about like The Expanse or Foundation, the show. And I can say like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Do you mind? And people here, or at least the people I've encountered, have been super open to being helpful. And I will say though, you know, like we are encouraged, we're incentivized to mentor and to help. So it's like building those relationships, I think is super great. Like finding a place for you to belong and then being able to talk to people and being very vulnerable and honest and saying like, this is what I'm trying to do. How do you think I should go about it? I do think that things lined up for me in a very specific and great way because some of my mentors, we were just all part of the same group. And we would just talk about music. We talk about movies and things that are happening in the industry. And then, so that's why I felt comfortable sharing my work with them. It's like, can you take a look at this? And from there, you know, like they began to mentor me on the process of becoming full-time. Like the goal was like, get Mitchell to be full-time here at Meta. And across that way, like once I got into the product design, I had a mentor on the team that I transitioned into. She is phenomenal. She held me down. She was kind of like an icy level above me, but then she had like a wealth of knowledge. So she was she held my hand. I'll be real honest with you. She held my hand, showed me the ropes. Moved to another team, had another mentor. So I would say like I probably have like 5-6 mentors right now, all for like different things. Because like there's one mentor, he is one of his product thinking is out of this world. Like if he had free reign to run his own company, well, let me not say that, but yeah, if he had free reign to run his own company, yeah, he'll build a dope product. But then, you know, like I have other mentors who are in different parts of the organization that are in management, and then they have like a different perspective as a whole. So they all come together, form up like Voltron, and they're like, hey, this super awesome Mitch machine, if he needs help, we're here to support him.
You tell me that's your nickname at work. Tell me that. Oh my God. No, that's awesome. I mean, so we have mentorship at Designlab and stuff, but you know, there's also like a huge community of just knowledge out there. There's just so many people. And I don't know if you've experienced the same, but at least for me, like I found that once you just express genuine interest in the field, almost everyone under the sun in design, like almost everyone, not everyone, almost everyone they're just so excited for you to be there. They're excited for you to succeed. Like, at least for me, I've yet to encounter another designer where like it just felt like it was always a competition. Like I never ever feel that in our industry. I feel like everyone is focused on themselves, but they're also not here to take anyone down. Yeah, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but
No, I agree. I agree because I think designers, like, I think there's enough room for everyone to eat. And so, like, I think that, like, we're all just trying to build each other up. And I know that in different organizations, sometimes design is fighting for its seat at the table, like,
Yep.
where, you know, like, we could.
Everyone. Yeah.
You know, like, there are some organizations that are super eng focused, super eng heavy. You're like, nah, design matters. And, you know, there's a certain solidarity there. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I haven't had a designer who I felt like I was competing with. No, if they did something dope, I'd be like, I should do that.
I want to
Like,
do
oh,
that.
dude, let me
I
show
want
you.
to do that cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I guess like, you know, for folks who, you know, we have a lot of career transitioners here. I consider myself a career transitioner. I mean, considering you worked at retail and stuff, like, would you officially call yourself like a career switch, like a switcher? Or would you
A
say
switcher?
like, yeah, like a career switcher?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm on the Monopoly board. I'm on Park Place, and then like I'm over here on Baltic Avenue. Like it's crazy. You shift around here.
It feels, yeah. Oh my God. So going back to like what you said earlier when you're talking about like the project that you're working on, right? Like, and how you're like fighting, you're like, no, it's like the user experience that matters. We're talking about metrics and stuff like that. Everything that you said there is exactly like what we had mentioned earlier about Apple and just how like they really instilled that mindset into us. Like even though we worked in a retail store, yes, the goal was to make money, but I also think we were fortunate enough to have worked at the flagship store in San Francisco where money just wasn't a thing because it just was always there. Yeah, and it was weirdly so. So I would say like we were a very lucky store to have a lot of freedom to kind of like act as we please, kind of. But I would probably say that's not the same for other stores. So if you're at a small store,
very true.
but I mean, like, it also makes sense for why, like, remember I was mentioning to you earlier was like, how many people at Apple that I know who are now designers. So I mentioned Tiffany. And for those of you, I did throw the link to Tiffany's YouTube, her recording in the chat. Her story is just as awesome. So I would say between both of you, like you both actually inspire me. I'm sitting here, I'm like, I want to work on cool things, but like I do work on cool things. It's just in a very different capacity.
Yeah, we just work on cool things in different places. That's all it is. That is all it is.
Well, I guess, okay, we can kind of like get into wrapping up, but like, what's your advice for folks who, you know, I'm sure you felt this. I certainly do sometimes, like, or still, imposter syndrome. It's our favorite topic on webinars here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, girl, listen. I was in a meeting today and I had like a million things on my mind. Halfway through the meeting, I actually focus. I'm listening into what we're talking about. I'm like, wait, what? Why are we doing this? Like, I don't know how we ended up on the page that we're on. And I'm the secondary designer. So like the primary designer, she's there, she's handling her business. I just don't understand how we arrived at some of the decisions that we made. I'm sitting there, I'm like, I then feel like this sense of like failure and defeat. Like I don't have this 360 awareness of all the things that are happening on my team. But like that is not the case. Like I think we're our own harshest critics. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because like after I stepped out of that meeting, you know, like I had people who are like, oh yeah, we worked on this and this is great. Like I'm planning on doing this next. So let me know when you're available so we can talk through it. And I feel like at the end of the day, a lot of people, we're just winging it. A lot of us are just like figuring it out.
Yep.
A lot of us are just like, hey, we're in this role, in this space that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yep.
Like we're in a brand new space altogether. All of us are trying to figure out how to solve problems, how to help people be healthy and help people connect. And so like, I would say like, I know it's going to creep. There's no way to stop it.
Nope.
But at the end of the day, just understand that a lot of us are just still just like figuring it out, trying to learn what this thing design is.
My mentor, I'm going to share this with everyone. It's going to sound like bad advice, but it wasn't. It wasn't because he in hindsight, he knew what he was talking about. He basically had told me, he's like, listen, you're going to have to fake it till you make it, not just for whoever it is you're trying to work for, but you're doing it for yourself. Just like you said, we're our own harshest critics. So like you almost have to lie to yourself to make yourself like understand that like you actually do belong as a designer. Your voice and your opinion matters, because what I truly love about this industry is that we're not making decisions based on ourselves. We're actually making decisions based on the intent that we're designing for others, and we want them to have like a great experience. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Don't worry, you'll get there. And then eventually, because like, okay, so one last little thing. We just went through our performance cycle.
Ooh.
We just went through our performance cycle. And I was like, from what I've heard, you know, like there's a certain level that typically most people fall within for the first half. Like this is the rating that most people get. And I got like a rating above that. I'm like, what?
What's happening here? Why are you playing me like this?
Why did you say I did this? But no, like, and my manager shared with me, she was like, oh, like, this was your impact. In your own brain, you only think about like the times you probably didn't do good in the meeting, or when the design mocks weren't as fleshed out, or you're thinking about like you didn't know how to answer that one question. But at the end of the day, you look at the whole, like the big pie, and my manager was like, no, the team said you did this, and this was your impact. And I had no idea because I was so in my head. I was all like, I'm a first time designer. I need to rock out. Oh no, I'm failing. And they're like, nah, dude, you actually did pretty dope.
Oh my God, that hits home for me, because I basically have the same conversation every year with my manager, or like she'll tell me like, oh, I presented your things to the board and they loved it. And I sat there, I'm like, but it's incomplete. Here's all the wrong things about it. Like it just doesn't look good, but that's not what people see. So basically what Mitch is saying is that it is true. We are our own harshest critics. We are probably only focusing on all the things because in our heads, if we miss the one question in a meeting, on a scale of 100, we probably docked ourselves like 20 points, but other people didn't even dock us any points on a scale of like 100. So it's really just us.
That's totally it.
All right. So this one probably are for maybe one or two more things. So on the topic of career switching, a big concern with our students, and I'm sure other students at other boot camps, is I have all this type of work experience, but I don't have design experience. How can I figure out a way to translate my experience? So in our case, let's take retail and or like customer support, something that is very like, you know, you're engaging with customers on a day-to-day, you're in like a service job. How do you translate those skills? Because you and I can clearly see like there's a lot of soft skills there that is like directly transferable, but like how do you like prove your point in like an interview? How do you show them without having things to like back it up? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's a really great question. Like coming into it, not having, like even coming into the design ops role, the only design qualification that I had was my graphic design degree that I had like several years back. You know, like I had to rely on the skill that was most pertinent to the job that I was applying for at the time, which was project management. I was like, hey, I'm a project manager now. They were like, cool. You kind of know design, you have a design degree. So that was literally the rationale. That was literally the rationale. I would say that, like, say for example, working in retail, working at Apple, we learned how to work within a team. We learned how to be able to communicate effectively. We learned how to be able to tell a story. We've been able to learn how to address user needs. You know what I mean? Do you want Apple Care or not? Let me tell you why you should have it.
We gotta ask the questions. We gotta probe a little bit, right?
Probe a little bit, yeah, right? 3 little piggies.
Ask for permission.
Like, so I think it's like leveraging, understanding like what design is about, and then what about your experience maps to those things. And you'll actually be surprised at like using user research, right? Like user research. We use research in retail. We're like, oh, okay, we know, like, hey, this is this is how people respond to the specific product. That's why we go through training, X, Y, and Z. Then we don't get me wrong though. There was some gymnastics to do there to map it. Just a little bit. But you can definitely, there is a line through most experiences that you can get there. Um, and just because this has been my experience, this is what I'm going to share. Sometimes you got to be in a different role to jump into the design role. It
Yep.
may not always work out though. I'll be real honest with you. Like, as the more I tell my story, the more I realize it didn't happen for as many people. But if the work is there, I think your odds are so much better. Right. So like, start out in design ops, start out in research, start out in content design, start out in something else that you already have like a lot of skill set in. If you were like a journalism or communication major, be a content designer first and then pivot, then become a product designer. Or if you're, like a barista at Starbucks now, like I'm sure there's probably something to like map into that direction if you have the body of work.
Yep.
I would definitely say that is important. And then also I see everyone trying to connect, leverage the network, like talk to
Yes.
people who are in those spaces.
Yep.
And being able to
Totally.
go from there.
Oh my gosh. Oh, all of that just so I guess like to one thing to add, right? So and Nakia, I think she had left, or he or she, I'm so sorry. Nakia left, but Nakia had brought up, certain points in the chat about, how everyone's skill sets, regardless of what industry you come from, it's mappable. And it's true, it is mappable. The reason why I brought up the question is because, especially when I was interviewing, and I'm sure some of you had kind of run into this, when you apply for a job, you're only submitting a resume. So all they're seeing is what's on paper, right? Like maybe your portfolio, if you have one, but oftentimes, even if you have a portfolio and your resume doesn't match, that's enough sometimes where employers will be like, no, sorry, you don't have the experience. So I brought up this question because when you figure out if you start to study like design principle and like design thinking, right? And you kind of take yourself out of the box and say, okay, well, these are the principles of design thinking. If I apply that to my job now, that's not design, how does that translate? So go backward, right? So when I do resume reviews for my students, I will ask them, when I look at their previous job experience, I'll say, was there any project or anything that you worked on that was impactful? Like, I know that these are all your duties, but from the duties that you do on your day-to-day job, what did you work on that was impactful? How can you tell that story? So that's really what people are looking for. They're looking for what impact you made, not necessarily just what you did. They want to know why you did the thing, what was the purpose of it, and like what the impact was, whether or not it was successful, like it doesn't matter. Not everything has to be successful. As Mitch said, right? Like last year you worked on 5 projects, only 1 really shipped. So, you can't really say like you were unsuccessful when, something didn't go as anticipated. That's part of experimentation. That's part of research. So it's all a part of the process.
Exactly. Wholehearted. +1.
Process. All right. Last words for our audience here. For folks who are, here to be aspiring designers, you're here to learn and grow. Like, what is like, I guess, 1 or 2 pieces of advice you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, I would say 1, like build relationships. Like, I know it seems like super, super basic, but building relationships is super important, and not necessarily just for the explicit, like desire to like land a role, but like generally wanting to like learn and to be able to develop your skill set, like being able to approach senior designers or even junior designers, but like, hey, like I have work, I'm looking to understand how to become better, understand my product thinking, build those relationships. Super important, because like I wouldn't be here without my own. And I would say that, like don't be afraid to like step outside of the confines of the box. Instead of, like, oh, I need to go to a boot camp, I need to go to do this, and then I need to like interview, and then I need to get the job. That might work. Don't get me wrong. That might work for like 90% of people. But then, like that little 10%, which is where I'm an outlier, and, like you might have like a different route or journey. Like when you join the big company, it may not be as a product designer, but then if you put in enough time, you'll be able to get there. Like it took me 3.5 years working at Meta to become a product designer. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It took me 3.5. I mean, like I was okay, so let's say 3 years total.
Wow.
Half a year as contracted PD, half a year now as full-time PD. Yeah. So like it takes time. Don't let anyone else determine what your journey should be, is what I'll have you walk away with.
Yep.
Like your journey can be whatever you want to make it to be.
Or as Apple would say, find the solution that best fits your needs.
Oh
That's
my God. Right there.
Oh my God. Well, I am so happy that this was how we got to catch up, because now I'm like, when I go home to the Bay Area, we're absolutely catching up.
Oh yeah,
which,
absolutely.
Which will be in a few months. So I will text.
Hit me up. Let's go.
Yes. So thank you everyone so much. We pretty much almost hit 200 live attendees. So that is amazing for a Thursday evening. So Mitch, you are a very popular man right now. So yeah, go connect with him on LinkedIn, all the fun stuff.
Yeah,
lots of great energy. Hopefully, you know, this kind of inspires all of you to just like take your journey, you know, for what it is, and just make it your own. Everyone's journey is different. There's no one set solution. It's whatever works for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say thank you, Emily, for even having me here. You made me feel like a big deal. I shared it on my IG story. People are like, "Ooh, that's an industry pro? What?"
Yeah.
You're like, "Hi." So thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who's been here, who's been saying they had a great time, great insights. I appreciate y'all, and I wish y'all the best of luck too. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This is recorded. Share all the things. Mitch, you and I we will chat soon for sure.
Sounds good.
Thank you, friend.
All right. Take care.
Bye, everyone.